Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Thundering Herd of Marshall, who finished 6-7 last season. They capped off the year with an appearance in the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl against UTSA. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 20th. We have a couple special guests joining us today. They are the _1 Marshall Athletics podcast on the earth. These two bring you the thundering word on the thundering herd. He is Rus Livingood. He is KD. Together they make up the ThunderCast Pod. Rus can be found at Rus Livingood on X. KD can be found at Son of Marshall on X. The duo can be found at ThunderCast_pod on X. Welcome to the show, guys.
Appreciate it, man. Looking forward to talking to Herd.
Yeah, and can I say what a kick-ass intro video that was, man? That was awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully you are ready to run through a brick wall. Justice puts a lot of work into that. I don't even know the first thing to do about that. He knocks it out of the park every time we do one of these.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I think probably about episode 20, I was like, holy crap, like I got like 40 more of these to make. But yeah, it's definitely worth it for sure.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. You got every time I see those highlights, the hair raises up on my arms a little bit and I get jazzed up and I'm like, all right, what are we like 60, 72 days until that first tailgate? You know, I'm that nerd. I say it all the time. I go back and watch the old highlights on YouTube, like pretty much every day. So yeah, I'm that guy. That did it for me. I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, I'm just going to drive over and start tailgating in the lot.
Well, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourself, what led you into starting the ThunderCast, and how long you've been covering the team?
Well, we started the ThunderCast. We're about to start season 4. But Russ and I have known each other since we both started Marshall. We came to Marshall at the same year in 1997, which happens to be Marshall's first year of what we now call FBS. So we made the transition to college just as Marshall was making the transition to the MAC. So we were there at right in the midst of the heyday. You know, I was fresh off of a 1AA, now FCS national championship. And then we took the MAC by storm. But we've been friends for 25 plus years. And when the opportunity came along because of a conference change and Marshall going to the Sun Belt, that was an opportunity for me to refocus and redirect my podcasting venture to something Marshall exclusive. And Russ was my first call. And it's funny. I want him to tell it because it's so great. Like, you know, Russ, tell him I called you and said, hey, I want to do this podcast. And you said,
what's a podcast?
So that's literally how it started, right? He went from, I don't even know what a podcast is, to now here we are hosting the ThunderCast and have been so unbelievably well received by Herd fans, players, coaches, administration, everybody, man. So it's just been one hell of a ride. And we can't be more thankful because we're just two fans that just love to talk about the Herd, man.
I have to say that I did know what a podcast was. I just did not know how to listen to them or anything. Didn't know where to find them. KD had one before this, Moonshine Throwdown, that was Marshall versus WKU, a rivalry podcast. And the move to the Sun Belt meant that rivalry was going away. So that's how this kind of came about. Is he said, I'd like to pick your brain about some things. And I'm thinking about doing one Marshall specific. And I threw in some stuff as well. I was like, well, you know, it ought to be all sports, not just football and basketball. It ought to be this. And we've ran with it, man. Now we've got a live tailgate show. We do some remote things. We have a spinoff show that KD does. We're just all about it. We've immersed ourselves in it, and our fans are so loyal, and that's what makes it all worthwhile to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's G5 football, right? In a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's what makes G5 football so special, in my opinion.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we don't have to be in the playoff every year for our seasons to be special because we know it's the uphill battle every year. We know who we are. right? We know who we are. And I don't think I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but you'll hear our coaches and our players and everybody say specifically about Marshall football that no team means more to a city than Marshall football does to Huntington, West Virginia. And that goes back to the history in the 70s, and everybody knows the story, and we may or may not talk about that today. I don't know, but that's what that means, man. So it's ingrained, there. And when Huntington is a true college town. And when I think of true college towns, I think of some of our conference mates. I think of Boone, North Carolina. Yeah. That's a college town, right? Huntington, West Virginia is a college town. I live outside of Tampa, Florida. USF is here. That's not a college town, right? This is a pro sports town. And there is a marked difference in just how the vibe of the whole damn town perceives its university.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting back to some Marshall football talk. So Charles Huff brings in a new offensive coordinator, Seth Doege from Purdue. He was formerly the tight ends coach there. He was also a former quarterback at Texas Tech under the late Mike Leach. Rest in peace to him. Mm-hmm. So he kind of comes from that Mike Leach air raid offense, tutelage, if you will. And so we've heard, all offseason that, hey, Marshall's going to switch up offense, go from this, strong running game to perhaps an air raid offense. But what can you guys tell us about Seth Doege and what he'll bring to Marshall?
Man, I tell you, it's a little bit quiet, right? That Marshall always holds things close to the vest, always have. So it's a lot out there is just what we think might happen based on Absolutely. What we think these guys are and their pedigree, right? And you mentioned it. When you think of air raid offense, by and large, just about anybody who immediately thinks about the first coach that comes in their head is going to be Mike Leach. By and large, there are others, but Mike Leach is going to be the first and foremost in your brain, most likely. So you're a quarterback under Mike Leach. You're learning that offense literally firsthand from the guy. And let's bring it fast forward a little bit. You mentioned being a tight ends coach at Purdue last year. Offensive coordinator is Graham Harrell, one of the most decorated air raid type quarterbacks in Texas Tech history, right? So we're expecting, I'm just not sold that it's going to be a full blown air raid offense. I don't think we're going to see that 70 pass attempts a year or a game. I think we're going to see a modified ish type air raid offense. Marshall's just not going to abandon the run game the way we know it. There's too many good runners in the running back room to just do that. So I think we're just going to, Russ and I have continually talked about is like, I think we'll see the percentage, the run pass percentages just fade a little bit higher in that pass percentage rather than just an all out, 80-20 pass to run ratio. We think it might be that 60-40, 65-35 type thing. And so that's why we keep calling it this modified air raid.
Yeah. And if I had to say what I think that, I've talked to some people from the Texas area, from the people that know about Coach Doege and about, the air raid specifically because they followed those teams and everything. He knows what he's doing, and I don't think Coach Huff in a contract year, this is his final year under his current contract, would just say, well, I don't know, I'll give this guy a shot. You're talking about keys to the offense that he's giving him. And a coach like Charles Huff is not just going to say, I'll bet everything that I have on this thing that's unknown. He knows people. He knows people in this industry. And Coach Doege is obviously a rising star. He was there under Graham Harrell, as KD said. So I'm all in on bringing this in. And if you think back about some of the greatest offenses that Marshall had, you think quarterbacks, you think receivers, you think throwing the ball down the field. And that's what our fan base has clamored for years is let's get back to throwing the ball downfield. Let's get back. No bubble screens, no short 5-yard passes and all this. We want to stretch the field. And we have historically done that. And when we've done that, we've been really, really good. Mm-hmm. You think of Byron Leftwich, you think of Pennington, you think of Cato, you think of Moss and all the different wide receivers that we had, and some that aren't household names to everybody, but are definitely household names to us. I think we're going to get back to that. We brought in a lot of weapons to do so, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure, in this episode. But everything that you had in those non-air raid years, when we think about Marshall stretching the field, every single year we had great running backs and we had tremendous running back stats from there. We never have just totally abandoned the run. It's always been very balanced, and I think that's what we're going to have, is a balanced air raid is what I'm calling.
Yep.
So there's one key difference, I think, in that Mike Leach tree, right? So you have the Mike Leach style of air raid, and then you have the Graham Harrell style of air raid. And to me, like the biggest difference between the two is how the running backs are utilized. So in the Mike Leach offense, the running backs are targeted heavily in the passing game, right? They're getting 60 targets, a season, 5 to 10 targets a game. But then in the Graham Harrell offense, the running backs aren't quite as heavily targeted, aren't as big a part of the passing game. Do you think Coach Deggy leans one way or the other in terms of that utilization of the running backs in the passing game? Or
I think what he's going to find when he gets there is that, hey, man, this Ethan Payne kid can catch the daggone football out of the backfield. We've seen it firsthand. We've seen those downfield kind of circus over-the-shoulder catches that you really don't expect the back to make. So I'm not sure that you lean one way or the other. You think, all right, well, maybe it boils down to a matchup thing. It's like, we think Ethan can maybe take advantage of some guys on this particular defense, so let's work it in a little bit more. And maybe on other defenses, you're like, you know what? Let's just focus on our speed guys on the perimeter. Let's try to work those tight ends, and let's just let the running backs run. So I think it's going to be his own thing. Honestly, I don't think he's going to say, I'm going to do the Harrell style or I'm going to do the Leach style. It's going to be the Daggy style, is what I feel like.
I always equate this to something that is non-sports, but I took over a group that I was under a mentor of ours, and KD was in that same thing. I took it over. What I did was I honored what came before me, but I definitely made it my own, and that's the way that I equate coaching with. When you get that shot is, Coach Huff was under Saban. But, he gets here, he's not going to have Saban's recruits and stuff like that. So he's got to modify his stuff to this. It's going to be the same thing under Graham Harrell. I think there's going to be a lot of Seth Daggy looking to how Graham Harrell did it. But he's also going to say, well, if I ever got the shot, I would put my spin on it by doing this. So, again, I think it's going to be modified. We may be talking 5-10 years down the road. Someone else on a podcast would be saying, now, is it the Graham Harrell style or is it the Seth Daggy style? So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the position that, is going to be slinging the pigskin around. They lost their starter from last year in Cam Fancher, but they brought in Braylon Braxton from Tulsa. However, we got to see a few glimpses from Cole Pennington last year. How did Pennington look in the spring?
Russ, take this one.
Well, I was at the game, and I was at the game. He looked pretty good. He and Colin Parachek were the two standouts at the quarterback. They were on opposing teams. Braxton and also Ja'Kai Long were also getting reps in there, so that were the four quarterbacks that got it. Pennington and Parachek both looked pretty good. I will say this with a caveat, though. I have been to many what we call the green and white game, spring game. And I never put any stock into it. It's one of these things that it's a practice that fans just kind of get to come to. Mm-hmm. I never come out of that saying, wow, here's exactly what our football team is going to look like. I never get disappointed by it. Sometimes we hold people out or they're not going more than 75% because maybe they've got a slightly nagging injury, a hamstring that's not torn or pulled or anything like that, but they don't want to hamper this person. So they don't even say, turn the Jets on. Quarterbacks are definitely no hit. They'll have different jerseys on and you can't touch them. I think that Pennington will do pretty well in this offense. But I can't say anything from what happened in spring that I can 100% translate to say, here's exactly what he'll do.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. I think, of course, the summer practices are going to go a lot farther in determining who's going to be your week 1 starter. And I just don't know who that's going to be. You know, that you got new offensive coordinator, tons of new wide receivers in on the roster, tons of new offensive linemen on the roster. There's so many moving parts. You know, the only one that has meaningful game action in a Herd uniform is Cole Pennington. And in the games that he started those games rough. He put himself behind the 8 ball early. I mean, we're talking about interceptions like nearly immediately. And that's tough for a young quarterback to bounce back from, you know, and he made some great plays, you know, but those are the lumps you take with a young quarterback. We know that. That's a story as old as time itself. Right. So what you're hoping as a Herd fan this year is that another year of off-season preparation, another off-season of reps and practices. And I can't really think of anybody else better to be picking the brain of from a quarterback position than Chad Pennington, right? One of the most intelligent quarterbacks ever at any level of football. So there's some positives there, but it all boils down to, can you execute? And fans, for better or worse, they just want Cole Pennington to succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them, I still feel unjustly look at Cole and see Chad. And that's just not fair. You know, it's just not fair. Cole's his own guy. And we were fortunate enough to meet him just at random when we were on campus, and he came in, we were walking through the Cam Henderson Center, the basketball arena, and he came in, and we stopped and talked to him for a second. And I told him, I made a point to tell him that, like, there are fans out there that see you as Cole Pennington, not Chad Pennington's son. Right. And he was like, thank you. Appreciate that. You know, and I think that does go a long way. But back to your question, new quarterbacks coming in. Does Cole make the leap? Does Colin Parachek get a good opportunity in the summer after having a really good spring game? Then he went in the portal and out of the portal. That's the greatest of all the questions right now surrounding Herd football. Who is going to be QB1, and whoever rises out of that room to be QB1, are they going to be able to adequately execute Seth Dagy's modified air raid offense?
Would you put that you kind of feel right now that Pennington's that number 1, Parachek 2, and then Braxton yet to be determined, but probably the 3?
I can't say that.
No, I would say right now that it would probably be a race between Pennington and Braxton, and then Parachek is a firm number 3, Ja'Kai Long a true freshman number 4, likely to redshirt, I would say. But again, we have not gone through fall practice or started fall practice, and in today's portal world, there's still quarterbacks out there. And it would not shock me if we took a flyer on another quarterback, because we had Mitch Griffiths was going to be in the mix on this, and he retired from football. He had committed and transferred to us, and then he wasn't even really on campus. He was still at Wake Forest finishing up, and wasn't here for the spring. And then he wasn't here, couldn't practice, because the time that he was here, maybe filling out paperwork or getting ready to attend summer school or whatever, he decided to retire. It was a dead period for practice. So we were intending on going in with another quarterback in the mix. So it would not shock me if we got somebody else in the portal before fall practice starts.
Moving on to the running game, Marshall has a great history of a strong running game for many years. They do lose their leading rusher from a year ago in 5th round NFL selection to the Baltimore Ravens, Rasheen Ali. But the aforementioned Ethan Payne returns on top of some others from that room. And then they also bring in Jordan Houston coming over from NC State. What can you tell us about the running backs and how they looked in the spring?
I think overall, you can't look. Ali's gone, so it's tough to hear this and think, oh, okay. But I think it's improved, right? Because Ali's not there. So versus last year, of course it's not improved. Ali was great. But depth-wise, I think it's improved, right? Ethan Payne is just such a throwback of a player. So many people sitting in the stands at Jones C. Edwards Stadium love when they put the ball in his belly and just watching him run, because he's the run over you type back that so many people like in Huntington, West Virginia. He's just so much fun to watch. He's a local kid, local-ish, Poca High School, Poca, West Virginia, right? So folks love cheering for those in-state kids to come and play for the Herd. And when they do well, they're easy to root for. I think that adding Jordan Houston says a lot. I think that says that, to me, that feels like your 1-2 punch out of the gate. But that ain't it. AJ Turner is a guy who's been on the roster for a couple of years. He's shown flashes in the past. He's shifty and shaky. He's speedy. He can get it done. It's just a matter of how many carries is he going to get this year, right? How are they going to distribute? If we're talking 35% of the offense is going to be the run game, that's not a lot of carries, right? How are those carries going to get distributed? But AJ Turner is a guy that can get to the end zone on any given play. And then you talk about guys like one-time Wisconsin Badger Antoine Roberts. He joined the roster last year from JUCO. He got a little bit of game. He looked good in his limited action. And then an interesting, intriguing prospect that comes to the Herd this year through this portal cycle from Division III DuPage. Deuce Young is a guy in the Chicago area that is just really intriguing. The stats don't blow you away. 414 yards last year at D3 DuPage on, I think it was like 70 carries or something like that. That's not bad. You're looking at almost 6 yards a carry. But it's just an intriguing prospect. If you watch a little bit of the film, you go, this guy could be something at the Sun Belt level, especially if Marshall's got a really good offensive line. This guy, he could hurt you if he gets a little bit of opportunity. So I like the depth overall in the Marshall running back room, but let's just be honest. There ain't no replacing Rasheen Ali with one guy. It ain't going to happen. He's just too daggone great.
Yeah, and Ethan Payne came in relief, as if you can use a baseball term here, for Ali. Ali gets hurt, is not in the James Madison game, and 1/4 of the carries that Ethan Payne gets on the year come from that game. And then the very last game, Arkansas State, he picks up another 19, which is also very close to 1/4 of it. And that was a game that Ali was in. And they, just had Fancher, Ali, and Payne just ran wild all over Arkansas State. And then second half of the bowl game against UTSA, he gets 11 carries. So the bulk of his carries, over 60-some%, are in that 3 games there. Other than that, I think was 8 carries was the most he got, and sometimes he got 2, sometimes he got 3. He was not an every down back until we needed him to be. He is more of a fullback traditionally, but he has the ability to go in there and play the tailback, the running back. I don't think we're going to have a feature back like we had last year, like we had the year before when Ali was hurt and we had Kalen Laburn in there. I think that we're going to have a committee running back, and I just feel like we're going to be up tempo. And I feel like with up tempo, we're going to trade out our running backs a lot. And that's just the feeling I have. I can't tell you that's because I have any inside knowledge or that's what I got from the spring game, because I didn't. But I just feel like we're going to go with more tempo, get the ball up and down the field. We've got plenty of wide receivers, plenty of running backs to put in there. But I'm with KD. Jordan Houston looks good. AJ Turner looks good. I think that we have enough depth there and guys that we can put in, and they all bring something that is multifaceted. It's not just that we've got one guy's speed and that's all he's got. One guy's a receiving back and that's all he's got. All of them do very well at what they do. But the one key that I think that will put someone on the field the majority over someone else is how well they block, because we're doing an air raid. And look no further than Ethan Payne. He blocks very well.
Yep.
So, you mentioned it'd probably be more of a committee than a one workhorse. type system. Would you say, I'm just trying to read between the lines, so like 40% Payne, 40% Houston, and then maybe that other group makes up that other 20%? Or how, I mean, if you put,
I don't know. That's hard to say.
yeah.
It's just really hard to say. It depends. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what kind of a pass catcher Jordan Houston is, and that could turn out to be what separates who's on the field more, because we know that Ethan Payne is a good pass catcher, a reliable pass catcher, and doesn't mind, putting the head down and taking the hit, getting the extra yard, getting the hard yard. And that's the kind of stuff that Marshall has needed the past couple of years. They've needed to get those hard yards, and sometimes we couldn't get them, and if this sputters, if this air raid type offense takes a little while to get legs under it, well, you can't be affording to go 3 and out all the time. You're going to need those hard yards, right? And that is the wheelhouse of an Ethan Payne. So Jordan Houston, I think, can get the hard yard if he's running the ball, but I don't know enough about him. I haven't seen enough of him to know if he's that type of guy through the air, So I do just thinking, I haven't thought about that 40-40 and 20 amongst everybody else. That might be the perfect recipe. Couldn't tell you, but I think you'll see a little bit of everybody. I really do.
Yeah, I can tell you Jordan Houston had some good receiving stats, and in the message board dive that I did when he came over here, and some of their fans at NC State was talking about how well he caught the ball out of the backfield and things like that. I think 2022 he had 25 receptions out of the backfield and a touchdown.
Yeah. Awesome.
For 200 plus yards. So he can get it done. Again, I think it's going to go back to who picks up this system and who picks up the blocks in this system. Ratio, I would lean more toward picking 4 guys and saying 25, 25, 25, 25. And from there, it's like whoever has the hot hand, they eke up to 30. Whoever, is, if you got a couple of fumbles, you miss some blocks or whatever, that 25 is coming way down. But I think we may see as many as 4 different backs early in the season to see who has what if we're coming out of fall practice not knowing who stands out. Again, if we were there every day of fall practice and we did this episode, 2 months from now, I could probably tell you who it's going to be. But right now, I don't know.
Well, the passing game lost over 90% of its yards from a year ago. What did this staff do to address the wide receiver room?
Man,
everything.
Have you paid attention at all to the ThunderCast.online transfer portal tracker? Because, man, oh, man, it is heavy on the wide receiver from the portal in standpoint. They went out and got some guys. They really did.
Yeah.
And they recruited some more guys. I know you've probably got a list of some of them, for sure. Fans have immediately been clamoring over guys like Christian Fitzpatrick from Michigan State, 6'4", 222. Yeah, I like that too, right? And then you talk about guys like Doc Chapman from North Carolina, who Russ and I just previewed a little bit in our special teams position group breakdown episode. We like him to be one of those guys in the mix to be in some of those returner spots. Elijah Metcalf, another G5 dude coming over from Middle Tennessee State, bringing his lightning speed over to the herd. Braylon Brown coming in from Ole Miss. And then let's not forget Chuck Montgomery. And I mentioned this in our episode. I'm not sure we've had a guy who is as exciting as Chuck Montgomery that's being talked about less for as long as I can remember at Marshall. The kid can just play, man. And I think it's fallen vastly under the radar because we didn't have that explosive offense through the air last year. We saw flashes from Chuck a couple of years ago. We saw some more flashes this past season. And he's one of my personal, favorites to kind of like it. This is the year. This is the year for him. But there's no bones about it. They went out and got wide receivers. They knew they had to bolster that room. They had to rebuild and reload that room. And they went and did it. And this is the first year for wide receivers coach, another Herd all-time great Aaron Dobson, most folks will remember him from that awesome backhanded catch against East Carolina so many years ago. He was elevated from an offensive analyst role to be the full-time wide receivers coach this year. And I trust him to teach the finer points of playing wide receiver at Marshall University, right? That ain't the same as playing at school XYZ. When you play at Marshall and you're from Marshall, it means a little bit something extra. And Aaron Dobson's he's an all-time great, so he knows the pressure of walking through the tunnel at Jones C. Edwards Stadium. He can adequately explain the feeling of what it's like hearing "We Are" and Marshall. He knows what it means to play that 75-week game. So he's going to be able to impart this knowledge on these guys outside of the X's and O's stuff. And I think that's going to go a tremendously long way when it's a new offensive rebuild. It's things like that are going to be a difference maker. Guys can run, guys can catch, and guys can make moves and break tackles. I am unbelievably intrigued to see what this starting lineup is going to look like when they trot out in week 1. I am like everybody else. We're all speculating, like, who's it going to be? We like this guy. You think it'll be that guy? And I think there's so many weapons here. If they get the right quarterback, it could be one of those KD bar the door scenarios, because the athletes at the wide receiver position are absolutely there.
Yeah, and piggyback on what KD said, we had a few more transfer in that I'll mention by name. Ty Perkins was a local kid about 30 minutes away from Marshall over in Ohio at Ironton, and he transferred from Cincinnati. He's 6'3". We bring in 6'1" Carl Chester from Tulsa and 6'1" Braylon Brown from Ole Miss. So brought in some height, brought in some shorter guys that are burners. If you go up and look at the 60-yard times in high school for Tyshawn Doc Chapman, it's unreal what this kid can do. Look on YouTube at what he can do and what he did at North Carolina in a very pass-heavy offense down there. We also returned DeMarcus Harris, who transferred in last year. He was formerly at Kentucky. And Brian Robinson, who's been here for 2 years, that was formerly at Florida State. So our wide receiver room is deep. It's who is going to be the top 5, really. And it reminds me a lot of when we were when Byron Leftwich was here, and our top 3 guys were putting up stats that were blowing away people in other colleges. Like the third guy on the depth chart as far as pass catches would be leading at other institutions. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see. But 6'4", 6'3", 6'1", 6'1", already had some 6'1s on the roster, and then you got a couple of 5'9", and Metcalf is listed on here as 5'6". I've seen him anywhere from 5'6" to 5'9", but we've got a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone stand out in the spring?
Yes and no. A lot of them did with different moves and receptions and such, but like just the nature of the way that they did it, they didn't like target somebody 15 times and they had 2 touchdowns. In fact, the wide receiver that had the most touchdowns was a lot lower on the depth chart, and he portaled out the very next day after the spring game.
Yeah,
he scored 2 touchdowns and then transferred out, but it wasn't anyone that anyone was looking and saying, hey, this guy is probably going to be the number 1 wide receiver. He's going to be your X, your Y, your Z, whatever you want to call anybody. And so people did stand out, but not like, we would determine on how it would impact this season.
Yeah, see, like the way they stood out to me is like a guy would make an unbelievable singular catch. Yeah. It wasn't an eye-popping stat line. It was like, oh, wow, look at the move that this particular wideout made on this particular play. So, yes, some guys stood out, but probably not in the way you were asking. And I wasn't going to say that, but he's right. The guy that had the best overall game hit the portal the very next day, which is just funny to me.
It's
know.
today's college football, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you maybe don't know what this wide receiver room looks like week one. If you had to put a wide receiver core out there, what's your starting lineup that you guys are putting out there?
KD, you go first.
How many do I have to pick? 3 or 4? Or what am I?
4.
3.
3? All right. If I'm picking 3 right out of the gate, it's Chuck Montgomery without a doubt. It's going to be DeMarcus Harris because he's been here and he's actually performed for us a little bit. And I think it's going to be Elijah Metcalf, and that gives me my super speedster, my little bit of a downfield stretch, and then Chuck Montgomery, who I just think is going to be a big time weapon this year. And if I have to pick a fourth, I think it's going to be Christian Fitzpatrick. You just can't teach 6'4", 222 as an outside threat.
Yeah, so KD and I will do our customary $1 bet and see who does better. But I'm going Fitzpatrick, I'm going Chapman, and I'm going Chuck Montgomery if I only have 3. If I have to put 4 in there, I might put Metcalf in, but I'm more likely to put another tall receiver out there, and it could be Brian Robinson, DeMarcus Harris, somebody that's been here already, or it might be Braylon Brown from Ole Miss or someone like that Carl Chester. But I want a little bit of height on the outside as well. Fitzpatrick to me is a no-brainer starter at 6'4". Chuck Montgomery to me is a no-brainer starter. And I think Chapman is a no-brainer with his speed and elusiveness and everything. But that's the Rus Livingood theory.
From what you were able to see in the spring and what you've heard so far, how would you describe the tight end usage in this new offense?
I don't know about usage, but I think this is one of Marshall's premier positions on this entire roster. I think tight end is probably, just given how many there are, there's only a few, 5 or 6 or whatever, it's probably the deepest position, percentage-wise, because you're probably looking at 3 to 4 of those guys are going to see time. Cade Conley is an all Sun Belt Conference tight end. He came in last year from Central Michigan, and we were unsure of who's this guy. What's he gonna be? And he is far more dynamic of a threat than I thought he was going to be. He's a known entity now, right? Without it, he's not sneaking up on anybody in 2024. Toby Payne is a guy who was going to be that they were going to be Batman and Robin, man. And Toby was injured early in the season, and we lost him for the entire season. And yeah, that name sounds familiar. That's Ethan's younger brother. So the brothers Payne are both on the roster at Marshall. Toby is an utter mismatch, man. He really is. He and Conley are going to wreak havoc in some sets when they're both on the field with Lord knows who they're lining up at wideout. I mean, the possibilities are really endless with what they can do with these guys. Justin Holmes is a transfer that comes in from Kent State. He started 12 games there last year. So you've got a guy who's played meaningful football at a previous stop. So it's not all brand new, so to speak. And then you got a couple of freshmen. I think we see at least one of those guys play. At some point they're going to get some snaps. And I don't know which it will be, if it will be Tracy Stevens or if it will be Aiden Steinfeld. But I like Aiden Steinfeld because he was Mr. Football in the state of Indiana from the tight end position. I mean, I think tight end is kind of just what their family does, because he's got an older brother that's a tight end. He was at Indiana, and I think he hit the portal, and I'm not sure if he's come out of the portal yet, but they're just a family. Apparently the Steinfelds are a family of tight ends. So this is the one position on the entire roster that I have zero concerns or worries about. I think Marshall is loaded at tight end.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add, because that was an excellent overview of everything that we have at tight end, the only thing about Toby Payne, he and Ethan are local kids from, again, 30 minutes up the road in West Virginia, but they are both old school. They are both tough. They were both, as some referee friends, some friends that went to that high school have all told me when they were in high school, the kids are just studs. They are athletes. And Toby Payne is a 6'4", 239 athlete that makes athletic catches, but he's fast. He is strong. He had that knee injury last year that basically robbed him of the entire season, but he's someone to look out for. Cade Conley had the stats last year, and again, that's on partial time because he got injured. But Toby Payne is one to look out for this year.
So you mentioned, Conley kind of leading the tight end in the stats last year. Do you think that happens again, or based on this depth, it's going to be probably more spread out?
I mean, it'll probably be more spread out, but it's not far-fetched to say that Conley will lead those tight ends statistically. It just may not be, head and shoulders above what it was this past season because, again, Payne was only on the field maybe a game and part of another, So these guys are definitely going to split time. They're going to split numbers. But, I mean, hey, Cade Conley could easily lead the team in tight end receptions and receiving yards and touchdowns. But they'll be a hell of a lot closer than those numbers were last year.
All right, the Herd lost just about everyone from that offensive line. Their lone starting returner is their center, Logan Osborne. Just like the wide receivers, I'm going to ask, what did the coaching staff do to address these losses?
The portal giveth, man. I got to boomerang back to our transfer portal tracker article because it's also pretty heavy on the offensive line side of things. And I expect of the 5 that I think will trot out there week 1, 2 of those are guys that were here. Of course, Logan Osborne is one that you mentioned. I think 3 of the 5 will end up being transfers in. The 5th guy to me, I think, is going to be Jalen Slappy. He's a guy that Coach Huff has referenced many times over the course of a couple of seasons. And it might not have always been from like an in-game production like standpoint. It sometimes it's from, how he and strength and conditioning coach Ben Ashford have changed his body. You know what I mean? And he looks the part more. So I think he's just proven that he belongs on that line. But no, man, from the portal, they went out. Russ, what was it? Like one day we got like 3 or 4 linemen in the portal in one day or something like that. But
we got 3 in one day.
Yeah, there have been a lot. And these guys, there's a mix of guys that are coming from these power schools that don't have a lot of experience there. And then there are some guys that have come in that have played a lot of ball at their previous stop. I don't know, man. This to me, I don't want to call it worrisome, but it's always the wild card on any football team. Unless you're returning your line mostly from year over year, this is always the wild card. Like, how will the line look? Because if the line doesn't perform well, is anything going to perform well offensively? So this is the biggest cause for pause for me. Is the line. And that's not that I'm not knocking these guys. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look like. I don't have a clue. There's so many of them and you're replacing 4 of 5. I mean, that's a lot. We had to replace, I don't remember how many it was last year, maybe 2 or 3 coming in. And so we're doing it kind of again, but I don't know. The transfer portal era takes away a lot of the familiarity with your roster. And it's becoming very apparent to me at this particular position group. But new offensive line coach comes in, Cody Creel, and that's where I'm putting my faith because this guy has experience as an offensive coordinator in an air raid-ish type offense. He comes to the Herd from most recently in the XFL, wasn't it, Russ?
Yeah.
He's just kind of been all over.
Incarnate Word.
Yeah, that's where he was offensive coordinator, was at Incarnate Word. And so I like what Cody Creel has to work with. And that's where I'm putting my faith in the coach to be able to put the right 5 in the right spot.
I'll tell you something without getting into specific names of who came in. This is more about last year. We had some individual really good offensive line players. As a team, I don't think that they meshed well. And, a couple of them, like A couple of them just went to the NFL. You
Mhm.
know, so we're not talking about like they weren't good, but as a unit, they did not do as well in pass coverage. In running the ball, they did great. The blocking was there. I mean, you know, the past 2 years we had some horses up there that just made this offense go, and it was good offensive line. They have struggled the last couple of years in pass protection as a team. Not any one individual person was bad at it. As a team, it just didn't seem like it was doing well. And that's why I'm glad that Cody Creel is here and with the experience that he has. And I look for our pass protection as a unit to improve. And I've said it from day one of this podcast, and I will say it the very last time that we ever record this podcast. Your offense is as good as your offensive line is, and also there is no other unit that needs to be synonymous and play together as one than your offensive line. So that's what I'm looking for this year, is what 5 will play together in the best possible pass and run blocking and protection that we can do.
I'm kind of thinking now that you could talk about the offensive line and what could work and not work is, Braxton comes over from Tulsa, and you mentioned him being in the mix there for that number 1, and he's more of that athletic running type quarterback. It's almost like Marshall has like hedged their bets. Like, hey, maybe, let's say they want, Pennington to be the guy, but our offensive line doesn't allow Pennington to be that guy. We're able to pivot to Braxton, or, maybe, we think it's going to be porous here, and it ends up things are shored up and we can get Pennington out there. I mean, honestly, you want the best guy out there for the job, whoever that is. But like, it almost seems like Marshall did a really good job of being flexible and being able to go either way.
Well, you're really describing exactly what we had last year. You had a mobile quarterback that, when healthy, was really, really effective. The problem was he was not always healthy, and he wasn't always like kind of hurt. He was noticeably hurt, and once his mobility went away, he was kind of a sitting duck at times, and it was tough. I hated that for the kid, because he stood in there and took shots and he kept competing.
Yeah.
And this is the same type of quarterback, that you're bringing in from Tulsa, is a guy that can throw the ball and run the ball and be a little elusive in the pocket and create some additional time. But also let's put to that point, Marshall also brought in an offensive lineman from Tulsa. So not do you just go get a guy, you go get a guy that's familiar with the guy that you brought in to play quarterback. So Marshall brought in overall 3 guys from Tulsa, a quarterback, an offensive lineman, and a wide receiver. These dots begin to start to connect a little bit, but still, I can't sit here and say Braxton's the guy. You can't, but they did go get an offensive lineman for him from his former team. They did get a wide receiver for his former team. But I think there's enough here that they will find 5 guys that obviously can start, but I think there's enough here that they could go 8 or 9 deep and be able to weather the storm of some injuries and be okay. I think if you get in a scenario where you lose 3 guys for some significant time, man, you might be singing a different tune. But I think they've done enough in the portal to this point to weather the storm of some injuries and be able to rotate some guys in and guys out and fit the need, so to speak.
I'll tell you a couple people that I think to look out for, and again, this is just pure speculation on spring game, but also how they performed at other places. But Bryce Ramsey comes over from Southern Miss, 6'1", 327. I look for Elijah Ellis, 6'4", 331 from Baylor that came over. But also we have a couple of redshirt freshmen. Isaac Clary is from right up the road, 30 minutes from Gallipolis, Ohio, 6'7", 334. And we have Jalen Slappy that KD talked about. He came in and started a few games at the end of last year, and it just seemed like the offensive line play improved when he came in. I think that he just fit that group better. But Logan Osborne is a local kid, and he's a 5th-year senior with us, and I think that he is going to anchor everybody. Lastly, I'm looking for it here. Man, I can't think of who it was. Sean Rouse is a redshirt freshman from Cabell Midland, which is right up the road from Huntington, 10 minutes away. I think that we're going to have a mix of young and a mix of transfers in that can step in and try to find a cohesive 5-man unit that can pass block the way we need to in an air raid offense.
Mm-hmm.
You guys had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024. Who would that player be?
Well, the cheap cop-out is whoever's quarterback won. It has to be that guy. Got to be. But let's say we get that guy, and I have to pick somebody else for me, I've said it so many times already, it's Chuck Montgomery. He's my guy this year. I feel like he's the guy who can just captivate that crowd with the electricity that he keeps in those cleats. He's got the ability to do that. Can he put it together enough times this year to be that game-breaking wide receiver that Marshall needs? I feel like he's the guy.
I'm going to go Christian Fitzpatrick, and I'm going with him because of the height. And I think that you can get away with a couple of bad balls, throwing them up in the air to someone 6'4" with a good vertical. And we did okay without comparing him to Randy Moss, but we did okay with a tall wide receiver on the outside before. But I really think that he's got something to prove to come here. Kind of felt like he was underutilized or could have been utilized better at Michigan State. So he's now got to come here and do that. Obviously, we have to throw the ball well to get it to him. That's what, but not saying he's MVP, saying he's breakout player. That's who I'm going with as breakout players. Christian Fitzpatrick putting up a very big year.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Jason Seymour was a DC in 2023, but this year they added Henry Baker to the co-DC with Coach Seymour. In addition to co-DC, Baker will be with the corners as the cornerback coach. He spent his last 4 seasons coaching corners at Maryland. What changes, if anything, do you expect from this defensive scheme?
Well, there's obviously going to be changes because there's several new coaches that are on that defensive side of the ball. Marshall made several moves. Bringing in Henry Baker was just one of those. Also, they elevated defensive analyst to safeties coach this year, Bob Shoop. And that's a guy, holy moly, 4+ decades in coaching at a high level. You're talking about a former defensive coordinator at Penn State, at Michigan State, and at Tennessee, and as was also the safeties coach at Michigan, and now he's our safeties coach. So the wealth of knowledge that is just on that back end of the defense alone is a little mind-boggling. Also, defensive coordinator Jason Seymour will also coach linebackers this year. The linebackers coach from a year ago was let go. So when Coach Seymour came to us, he was linebackers coach at Georgia Tech. So that's a natural type fit and somewhere he wants to get back in, contributing more so on a second level type area. And then, of course, the defensive line has just been coached up since Ralph Street has been here. And he is part of Huff's inaugural staff. He's a Herd all-time great. He knows a thing or two about defensive line play at a freaking high level. And he's just churned out great defensive lines year in and year out since he's been here with the Herd. And of course, all of that looks great on paper, but you got to have the guys to execute, right? And Marshall took hits either through exhaustion of eligibility, heading to the draft, or the transfer portal. It's documented. We've talked about it. And some of it is a little concerning because this is where some of those guys that we thought would be impact players on defense hit the portal and left, right? You can't, just like you can't replace Rasheen Ali with one guy, I don't think you can replace Owen Porter with one guy. You might find a guy that rushes the passer faster. You might find a guy that can do this particular skill set better. But top to bottom, Owen Porter is a guy that is as rough and tumble and fast and fierce on his 75th snap of the game as he is on his first snap of the game. Now, that being said, there's obviously going to be changes. Marshall has a myriad of young defensive backs that cut their teeth last year. So this year, they're going to have some guys that have been in the fire and performed in the fire. So I'm not really concerned about who they put out there at corner. I'm not really concerned about who they put out there at safety because, hey, J.J. Roberts returns. You're talking about an all-conference safety, right? A guy that was second on the team in tackles last year. And he missed games. So he's just a ball hawk, another local kid. Linebacker for me is where it is a little concerning. You know, we lost 4, I believe it was, like back to back in the portal. And some of those guys we thought were going to be starters. So what are we going to do there? I don't know. We went out and made some moves. There are some youngsters on the roster that we think are going to step up and be, you know, play a bigger role this year. Son of former Marshall linebacker and Herd Hall of Famer Max Yates. His son Jaden Yates is on the roster. He was a freshman last year, played special teams, played linebacker. So we expect him to contribute in a big way. As far as what the X's and O's are going to look like, I really don't know what to tell you. We do know that Marshall needs to get back to the defense that we saw 2 years ago. They were stifling, and Marshall absolutely won games because of that defense. If we're going to be trying to break in an all-new offense, we're going to need to have a solidified defense to make it a little easier to do that. So things are definitely going to change. I mean, that's why you replaced 4 coaches. You needed some things to change. Huff recognized that, and he made the moves. They brought in more than serviceable coaches. They brought in intelligent, high IQ guys. And there were athletes on the roster already. They brought in more. Russ, I mean, what do you say on top of all that? It's more of the unknown for us.
It is unknown. The only thing that I'll say is scheme-wise, you know, I mentioned earlier that I picture us going more up-tempo. In 2012, we were maybe 1, maybe 2 in tempo on offensive plays and speed and things like that. And we had an absolutely porous defense because they were just on the field the entire game. So I look for something, if we're going up tempo, but not to that crazy level this year, but also with an air raid where, you know, a couple of drop passes or an errant pass, and all of a sudden you're 3 and out, your defense is back on there. I think that we are going to have to try and force turnovers. We're going to have to be that team that is looking for those interceptions and everything, but also just bringing the heat with blitzes and looking to sack the quarterback and raise all kinds of hell on defense to try to get the offense back on the field and maybe even pick sixes, scooping scores, things like that. So I look for us to be an aggressive defense. And when we talk about the defensive line, I think it'll be apparent why.
So speaking about that defensive line, you know, they take a pretty big hit in the offseason, losing their top 3 guys in terms of sacks and pressures last year. Sam Burton and then Owen Porter to graduation, and then Elijah Austin off to University of Miami. But not all is lost. They returned some experienced guys such as Mike Green, Tyquaze Legs, and Isaiah Gibson Sr., among others. How did that group look, and is there anyone that kind of stands out to kind of help replace that lost production from a pass rush perspective?
Yeah, so we brought in all kinds of people. However, we already had Mike Green here. We had Gibby, Isaiah Gibson Sr. here, and already had Tyquaze Legs here that all have been very, very important cogs in our defense. Mike Green was the young transfer last year that as the season went on, he got more and more playing time. He looks to factor in a major portion this year. It was just hard to break into that defensive line starting 4 because, like you said, those 3 that left were just so good, right? But we brought in Dave Harris from Colorado. We brought in, let's see here. Jabari Ishmael didn't get to play last year at University of Miami. He was out with an injury, missed all the year. We brought in Jacarius Clayton from Mississippi State. Michael Green, I already mentioned. Jason Shuford from East Carolina. Chris Thomas from University of Florida. Yeah. We brought in a lot of people. And we've got some intriguing freshmen. One, Braden Ward, is a West Virginia kid from in the Charleston area, 30, 45 minutes away, an hour away. And he's 6'6", got an unbelievable motor. I mean, just seems like he's going to be a good player for us. This defensive line is my number one unit going into the year of any offensive defensive units. I am not worried a bit about this defensive line. I think it is by far a strength. And I think that we've got so many people to plug in. Can we replace the exact production of Owen Porter? Can we do Sam Burton? Maybe not in individuals, but as a group, I think that we're going to have a comparable year to the last 2 years that we've had. And it's always been a standout for us.
Yeah, there's some other guys that I'm intrigued by, right? Russ did not mention a fellow that committed last year, and now he's going to be a redshirt freshman. That's Benny Tashita. He comes out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
Marshall got it on him early, and he committed early. And at 6'3", 294 as a redshirt freshman, he hadn't been playing football that long, but man, they all talked about this raw talent that just needed to be honed, and there needed some direction added to it. And that's where a guy like Ralph Street comes into the mix to, kind of hone that skill set. Jacarius Clayton, Russ mentioned, the guy comes from Mississippi State. If I'm not mistaken, this is a guy, 6'4", 235, redshirt sophomore. He was a hybrid. He was playing tight end also. And the question was, was he going to play tight end for Marshall, or is he going to be a defensive lineman? Well, he comes in playing defensive lineman. And to me, if you also played tight end, you're not an interior defensive lineman. That guy's probably going to be an edge rusher, right? And if you throw him on the edge opposite Mike Green, who is just a athletic freak. I mean, he is unbelievable. The light bulb really went on for him in that last third of the season. If you're going to, I'll tell you what, if you're going to ask me in a minute, I'm going to answer it now. Mike Green is my defensive breakout player. That's how much I think he's poised to be that guy. He's the next great defensive end for Marshall University. Fans love him already. And he just, I don't know how to explain it, man. He just wants to put his head down and go to work. You know what I mean? It's like in a world where kids care about likes and retweets, and he doesn't. He just wants to go to work, get in the gym, hone his craft, and then go terrorize on game day.
Yeah.
And for all I don't have any problem with social media, right? That's how we grew. That's how we all grow. But it's refreshing to get a guy that just wants to go to freaking work, man. He just wants to get sweaty and freaking play football. And that's Mike Green. And I think he's going to be the fans across the Sun Belt and the G5 are going to be like, wow, this kid at Marshall is pretty unreal. So I'm with Russ. I am not concerned about defensive line. I'm so high on our tight end room. Defensive line is right behind for the one that I'm not worried about. And it's easier to do that with tight end. Like I said, there's only 5 or 6 of them on the roster. There's a lot more, right? And it's a lot more moving parts along the defensive line. But I am absolutely not worried about defensive line. For all the questions that I may have for linebacker, I don't have any for defensive line. None.
Well, let's talk about that linebacker.
One other name.
Oh, go ahead, Russ.
Sorry, one other name that I didn't mention we brought in from Virginia is Olasunkanmi Ogunloye, and he is intriguing to me as well. I just, with everybody that we brought in who were returning and everything, yeah, we lost a lot. I think there's so many big bodies and so many athletes. It's not just, hey, we're bringing in somebody that's 6'5" and 380 pounds, and we're just going to put him there as a roadblock. We've got guys that are amazing athletes on the defensive line.
So we'll look at that linebacking group. They lost their top 3 guys in terms of snap. They graduated their leading tackler from a year ago, and Eli Neal. Keyshawn Brown graduated, and they lost Stephen Dix Jr. to Arkansas. This room looks young. Katie, you mentioned you're like, hey, I'm a little bit worried about here. What do you guys expect from this group in 2024, and who do you think takes the field there in those linebacker spots week 1 versus Stony Brook?
Let me answer the second question first. Who I think is going to trot out there? JC Anderson is a lock because he's performed for us for a number of years. He's a redshirt senior, been here. He's a program guy. He didn't transfer in. He's been here, right? He's a lock. I think Jaden Yates is a lock as well because he played last year in the mix of all those guys that you just mentioned that departed. The third linebacker, I don't really know. It could be a number of guys, right? But I like the thought of a Leon Hart Jr. He's a kid that's also been in the program. He didn't transfer in. He comes out of Miami, Florida, really highly recruited when we were able to get him. So those are 3 guys that I think are my favorites if I had to pick. But the questions are depth. That's what it is. You know, we're talking about the guys that we expect to start, or I expect to start this year. They were all depth guys last year. And now those guys don't really have too many options behind them. Yeah, there's linebackers on the roster, but there's not a lot of them, right? And there's even less guys that have played. So that's where the questions come. It's not about ability. It's not about having the athletes. It's about the rigors of an entire season with a not so deep room, right? You got 4 or 5 guys that you could probably make some hay with. 3 for sure. I just don't think that they are necessarily done. I think that's one of those rooms where you might see an ad in the portal late in the process, you know? And those type of things have been beneficial to Marshall and a lot of schools. You know, there've been super impact players that have come in, you know, late July, early August, even, you know, so, the top 3 guys, I feel like, well, if they were able to stay healthy, absolutely. I would have no worries about them and how they would stack up against many other linebacking cores across the conference. But it's the overall depth of the room that concerns me.
I think you're going to see transfer Ashton Heflin from Georgia Tech. I think you're going to see him heavily in the mix, if not starting. You got to remember Georgia Tech linebackers. That's what Coach Seymour coached, and he's the linebacker coach. He brought this kid over, so he was high on him. You know, if he wasn't high on him, he would have said, sorry, we don't have a spot for you. But he told him to come over here, so I look for him to be heavily in the mix. And also, you got Landon Watson from TCU, 6'1", 245. He's coming from TCU, and he's a redshirt junior, so he's got experience. This is a young crew. I look for him to be heavily in the mix. Don't know if he'll start, that sort of thing, but he should get a lot of time just out of nature of everybody else, man. They haven't had a whole lot of snaps in Division I college football. You know, they haven't had 2 full years in the weight room and a strength and conditioning program and just everything that it takes coming to campus to get into college mode from high school. You know, how you eat, juggling your classes, all the different things that go on. As a redshirt junior, he has experience with that. So I look for him to be in the mix as well.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, Russ, wasn't he kind of like a defensive end / linebacker at TCU? Wasn't he kind of a hybrid type guy? I seem to recall talking about that when we were talking about him.
Yeah, I don't know if that was because of him or because of their scheme or whatever, but he did have a history of playing both.
Right. Moving over to the defensive backfield, they also took a hit this offseason with the losses of Diane Hill to University of Miami, and then first team All Sun Belt defensive back Micah Abraham to graduation. However, they do return a fair amount of production. The aforementioned second leading tackler last year, J.J. Roberts, returns, A.J. McGee and Josh Moten. And they also have some freshman standouts that returned from a year ago, like Jacoby Henderson and Amir Foster. What can we expect from this unit here in 2024?
Well, out of the gate, let's give Micah Abraham his due. We lost him to graduation, yes, but he also ended up in the NFL. Okay, so he's an Indianapolis Colt. So he was a great man, and we asked some of these same questions at the beginning of last year because we were fresh off of losing Stephen Gilmore to the, who eventually, lands in Detroit to play for the Lions. And we thought, okay, can Abraham do it with somebody else opposite him? And he proved he absolutely could. So we're asking some of these same questions, but this is where all those young DBs, the A.G. McGee's that you talked about, the Josh Motons that you talked about, even guys like Jadarius Green McKnight, who's played for us in a number of situations. He's a redshirt junior, right? He's a Florida State transfer. Does the light bulb fully go on, and is he that impact player that we expected him to be? Is he going to be in the mix, right? Ishmael Ibrahim, a guy that comes over from the University of Texas last year, super highly recruited out of high school. Is he going to be in the mix this year? I've been high on Jacoby Henderson since he was a true freshman in his first spring ball, and we watched him go up against our then number one wide receiver, Corey Gamage, who was physically imposing, and he just went toe to toe with Corey Gamage. I think Jacoby finds his way in the three-man rotation at safety. I mean, JJ's got it pretty much locked up. He's not really going to come off the field unless, somebody's helping him off the field. He's just that good of a player. Datewan Smith is another guy that has played a lot of ball for the Herd, is another redshirt junior. Marshall's not hurting in the defensive backfield. This is where the rough coverages, the missed calls, all that stuff as a young DB last year kind of goes out the window, and you get the benefit from it this year. Again, this is another one of those a story as old as time type things. At some point, you've got to cut your teeth. These guys did it, a lot of them together last year. And then you talk about the coaches that we bring in, Henry Baker and, again, Bob Shoop. Nobody's going to coach them up like these guys, obviously. Bob Shoop has forgotten more about defensive football than I will ever learn. And Henry Baker has been putting guys into the NFL from the University of Michigan for the last 4 years. What more can you ask for? As a G5, what more can you really ask for? You really can't. The athletes are there. The skill sets are there. The playing time is there. Now it's about mentally, can you get yourself in the right spot? Do you know where you're supposed to be? Are you advanced enough in your defensive playbook to know where your teammates are going to be, right? And I think that we're going to see improved secondary play this year. It sucks to lose Micah Abraham. Absolutely sucks. That guy locked down half of the football field. But I think there are a couple of DBs, 2, 3, 4 of them from the corner slot that, depending on which two are on the field at any given time, also half of the field can be locked down. And whoever's throwing to the side of the field that J.J. Roberts is on, good luck. Good luck. Because your wideout is either going to take a lick or maybe he'll come down with the football and go the other way. Not worried too much about the Herd secondary, other than, man, it sure does suck to lose the Iceman.
Yeah, and to add to that, be on the lookout for Isaiah Johnson. He transfers in from Arizona State, originally grew up here in West Virginia, and he was a good performer out there, redshirt junior. I think that what is intriguing to me is how often we will be in the nickel with our current linebacking situation. Will we have that hybrid safety that would be like too small for a traditional outside linebacker, but he's there on the field? I would look for us, if we don't have a big portal ad at linebacker, just with the youth that we have there, that we might be in the nickel quite a bit and go with 3 safeties and 2 cornerbacks. But that's just a feeling I have.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular safety you think that might be suited for that hybrid linebacker safety role, or?
I don't know.
It kind of feels like that might be the Jadarius Green McKnight role, because he's just kind of played that ish. He never was a linebacker, so to speak, but he plays, he likes to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. And while that might not be a natural fit, it might be something that he could morph into in certain scenarios. I don't think Marshall doesn't have a guy on the roster. There was a great one. This has been nearly a decade ago. And if you're like me, whenever you see a current player, you always compare them to a former player, right? And that great hybrid linebacker safety that we had, that I compare everybody to, that Herd fans that are going to listen to this are going to go, yeah, that's the guy. It's the great DJ Hunter. Without a doubt. I mean, and to put that on pro terms, since you're not really an adept into the depths of Marshall players, think Cam Chancellor, right? That's DJ Hunter, Cam Chancellor. Okay. And I don't know that we have a guy like that, but we have a guy that could potentially become that if he's needed.
Jadarius Green McKnight is 212 pounds at 5'11". So, he's got the size of what you would expect that could fill that hybrid role. You're just not going to put out someone. I'll just put here Ishmael Ibrahim is listed as 6'1", 166. That just doesn't scream hybrid linebacker. But
Right.
Jadarius Green McKnight has the athleticism, but he's also at 212 pounds. He's heavier than some schemes outside linebackers already at that safety position. So to me, that seems like the natural fit.
Yeah, Jadarius is the only DB or safety on the entire roster that is over 200 pounds.
All right, Russ. So, Katie, I got your breakout guy is Mike Green. Is that correct?
Got to be Mike Green. It has to be.
All right, Russ. If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who you picking?
Same, Mike Green. It's his athleticism for me. It's the fact that potential was already there, but he was just under a couple of superstars and trying to get enough snaps in. And then even at that, he got those snaps later on in the year. He worked his way in underneath these high performers. And Coach Huff said when he brought him over here as a transfer, the coach over at Virginia said that he was the most talented player on their roster. The Virginia Cavaliers, Mike Green, as a freshman, was their most talented. That was his year that he redshirted. So just look on Twitter and you'll see some of the feats that he does in the weight room. And he is still so young, but he is just a freak of nature. And he's got the speed, the strength, the moves. He's going to be a great one for us.
Now that spring practice is over, you guys have mentioned this. Is linebacker the position group you're most concerned about, or is there another one?
Quarterback for me is number one. Linebacker is probably number two, but I would put offensive line up there as well, just because I said it earlier. You're only as good as your offensive line is and how they play as a unit. So that, to me, even if we've got 7 good offensive linemen, 12 good offensive linemen, I don't know how well those 5 are going to play together right now because we don't know who they're going to be. So it would be, for me, quarterback number one, and then a distant number two tied would be linebacker and offensive line.
Absolutely the same for me as well. Absolutely the same.
And you guys have answered this throughout, but maybe there's other positions you want to add to it. But is there anything in particular you think they may still be looking at in the portal? I know you guys mentioned quarterback and linebacker as 2 of them. Is there any other positions?
I can't nail down a position, but I can tell you this, that Coach Huff never shuts the door on an opportunity to make a position better. So if there's a guy that he thinks can help win him football games and there's a scholarship to give, he's going to go after that guy. He was the number 1 recruiter in the country when he was at Alabama for a reason. He identifies talent and tries to go get that talent. And it's a different ball game recruiting to Marshall as it is to Alabama. We're not saying it ain't, but that's just in his DNA. He's going to go find a guy that he thinks can help win football games. But I just think for you might want to look at another linebacker or 2, or just see what's out there, just to add depth. You got to have it. Yeah. It's a long season, man. We all know that. And I just would not be surprised if we see a quarterback pop up late in the process.
Another thing that Coach Huff does is he tries to stagger his roster, that you have so many freshmen at a position, so many sophomores at a position, juniors, seniors, and so on. So if he looks at that and says, hey, we're kind of short on junior linebackers, he's going to go out and look at some linebackers that have a couple of years to play. But we definitely have spots to fill, by meaning we have scholarships available, because in today's world, we had so many enter the transfer portal after that spring. When that window hit in May, we had so many. Some of them were guys, at least 3, that came here that semester. They transferred in January, and then they transferred back in May, and they were here for the spring practice, and that was it. And it was both sides of the ball. So we definitely have scholarships to give, and we are definitely a team that is always looking. So it would shock me more if we didn't bring in some people than it would that we are bringing in people.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. What would you guys say that the main strength of this team is?
Defensive line. That's the main strength. Not too far behind would be the defensive secondary. That'd be my 1 and 2. There's just too many unknowns on the offensive side of the ball, and you're breaking in an entire new offensive scheme, whole new everything. So it's never really a question of athletes and talent. It's just new. It's too much new for me, and I know what I have from a defensive line coach. I know what I have from a defensive line roster, and I know what I have from a lot of returning players in the defensive secondary. For me, 1 and 2 is defensive line and cornerbacks and safeties.
Throw in tight ends, and that's my answer.
Tight ends, yep.
But defensive line by far number 1 for me.
When it comes to recruitment of new players and the retention of existing players, both the NIL and transfer portal play a huge role in today's college football world. What kind of impacts have you seen that have there at Marshall?
We just talked about it with people coming in and leaving. But it's one of those things that we've seen it, and I'll use basketball as well. We had someone that we were the only people in on him and recruiting him, and he came here and it was the standout center for us, and then he transferred to the University of Florida, and it was NIL. They came around and they said, "Hey, we have money. Let's back up a truck," and he took it. And that sort of thing happens in football as well. But what has really hit that I've noticed for us on the transfers out is it's rarely that we see someone transfer out because they say, "I can go to a better school," or "I can do this." Everyone kind of buys in where they're at, except for we have people that are not, they're lower on the depth chart, and they will either make a lateral move or they'll go down a level or something like that. Some of them are leaving because they want to get playing time or even a scholarship,
Yeah.
But what we've seen from the transfer portal is Coach Huff has embraced it. He has never been one like some fans do that say, "Oh, it's ruining college football." He never even considered that. He just said, "Okay, this is what we have to do. Then I better hit the ground running and doing it."
Yeah.
And that's what he's done. He has constantly just brought a stream of new people in. Even when he brings them in and they leave in one semester, then it's just like, oh, well, they're gone. I mean, you can't cry over it. You just got to bring somebody else in. And as KD said, he is always looking to improve at every position. And if somebody's out there, he's going to bring them. NIL has been something that we just, as of this month, feel like we're taking a step to the next level with our NIL, and brought in Athlete Advantage to run our NIL here at Marshall, the Thunder Trust. And we feel like it's going to grow and keep growing. But it's one of those things that we are not a school that has just like so many people that are Ohio State fans, never even went there, but they might be in California and say, "Oh, I'm giving them all kinds of money because that's my team." You don't have that in a regional G5, which you guys know because you're the G5 Hive, right?
Yep.
So it's one of those things. Thankfully, NIL for us is these kids just want a little bit of spending money. They're not looking to get $1 million in a Lamborghini or things like that. They are looking to get a little bit of help on paying their cell phone bill. They don't want to have to go out and get a job or something, so maybe a little bit on their bills or something like that. Or maybe they have some spending cash so where they can eat a little bit better. That's what we're looking to feel with our NIL. We're never going to be those ones that's going to outbid Texas or something like that. So that's how it's impacted us.
Yeah. But if you talk to most herd fans, they think it's only exclusively happening in Huntington, West Virginia. Nobody else experiences transfers. Nobody else experiences, NIL anything. It's all exclusively in Huntington, West Virginia. But he's right. Coach Huff has embraced it, and he's seen it as a vehicle to improve his team because the transfer portal is a two-way street. People forget about that, but they bemoan every player that wants to leave, and they think they know the reason. They think they know the reason, and the truth of the matter is we don't know the reason. Yeah. Some are looking for a scholarship opportunity. Some want to be closer to home. Maybe some just had a bad experience. Maybe just some need a breath of fresh air. You just never know. But those same people are the first ones to be like, welcome home when the new guy commits to the team. And you're like, I love the enthusiasm. I really do. But you can't live and die on every transfer. You can't. Yeah. You can't. You got to win with the guys that show up on Saturday. And that's how I've looked at it, because if I looked at it any other way, I would drive myself crazy, because the love that I have for the herd, it used to ruin my day, my week, really, when Marshall would lose a football game. And now I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Why is this ruining my week? I can't do that. So I had to take a step back, and my love for the herd didn't diminish, but I had to stop letting it personally affect my freaking week, man, and that was hard to do.
Yeah. It is hard. Let corporate America ruin your week.
Yes, there's a time and a place for everything.
Let that ruin your week.
So now I just look at it I try to look at it the way Coach looks at it, as a vehicle to make our team better. You can't control a lot of the things, but you try to control what you can control. And if a guy leaves, you can't control that, but you can control trying to bring in a player that can improve a position. It might not be a linebacker for a linebacker, but that's an opportunity to make your team better at a position. So you better do it.
So it seems more and more that the demands of a head coach are really turning into more of a general manager type role between the recruiting, player retention, fundraising, etc., and less of the X's and O's. Are you seeing this trend happening at Marshall with Coach Huff?
Let me tell you what I think Coach Huff has done a great job is he has brought in a general manager or a director of football operations and had specific staff members that are not on-field coaches, specific people that's what they do, to take that off of his plate, because you're right, it has gotten to that point. And when you start dealing with NIL and you start dealing with the transfer portal and all that, he has identified that, hey, we need to run this like a business. We need to have these people in this place and this role and this role. And we've got some daggone good guys in those roles. And they coordinate things and they set things up and they do things to alleviate all that off the head coach and allow that head coach to mentor his players and put the best team that he can on the field.
Yeah, I would echo that too. He's done a phenomenal job. Some of the support staff are just top tier human beings. They really are, and we don't have, at least I definitely don't, because I'm in Florida. Like, I don't have a relationship with these men and women in the athletic department to where I might bump into them on the street, because Russ is in Huntington. I'm not in Huntington. But anytime I've had an interaction with some of the support staff and things, man, they are just salt of the earth human beings. And I think that's what you have to have in order to be in a game like recruiting and to be in a game like fundraising, because like Huntington, West Virginia, the fan base, by and large, what they want to feel is like they are closer to the team and the program than they were a day ago. For the reasons we laid out earlier, plane crash and the history and all that, and how Marshall means more to Huntington than any other team in the country. It's part of you. It really is. And I don't like it when they say, like, we're one big family. Everybody pitches that. Everybody pitches. We're a family here. We're going to be like family. The difference is Marshall delivers that. They really honestly do. And so fans want to feel connected to that team. They look at those players as extensions of their own family. I mean, it's weird. If you guys have, it's not weird in a bad way. It's just like weird, wild. It's like this family thing. If you've ever been to a game in Huntington, or haven't, you need to come to one, because it's not something that I can articulate to you. You have to put your eyes on it and you go, now I get it. Now I understand it. It's not like anywhere else. It just really is not. And I'm not saying we're special. We're just different. It's just different here. And that's why so many opposing fans that come to our games want to come back to our games, because it's different, you know? So yes, it's a little bit of a different animal in Huntington, West Virginia. Coach Huff has done a phenomenal job bringing in, like Russ said, the support staff that takes these things off of his plate so he can focus more on the football aspect of things. But I'll be honest with you, man, folks like listening to Coach Huff talk. When he has been on our show and peeled the curtain back a little bit and given information that fans want to hear, they really respond to that. And he's won over a lot of them because he immersed himself in the local traditions of the city and, just being here. Doc Holliday was a great coach. He won a lot of football games, but Doc Holliday wanted to coach football, and that was it, And I've said that before. There's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. But that was a little off-putting to some fans because they didn't feel as connected as they do now. And when you talk about former players, they really feel more connected now because they've made a targeted effort to get those guys more involved with the program, get them coming back. That's an underrated aspect that you guys didn't even bring up. Your alumni. Man, I'm telling you, that's a tight-knit group of dudes, and they love their herd football because most of those guys are our age and they were winning a buttload of games and a lot of championships and they like to talk about the glory days and it's awesome. So he's done a great job. He really has.
How would you guys define success for Marshall in 2024?
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, right? Because I don't care what the expectation is. Like, oh, we were 6-7 last year. It's a rebuild this year, dude. The expectation in Huntington, West Virginia, is always that you will compete for a championship of some sort. You will compete for a conference championship. It's been a long time since we've had one. We were in a game. Conference championship, and when we were in the Conference USA in 2020, the COVID year, right? We haven't won one since 2014. That doesn't lower my expectation that we play for championships because, as I mentioned, when Russ and I were students and coming up in that era, that was the motto for herd football. We play for championships. You don't just put that in the closet and not talk about it, right? That's who you are. If you're not playing to win a daggone championship, then why are you playing? I know that we may not go 10-3. I understand that we might limp across the finish line and end up 6-7, but that doesn't lower my expectation. Success for Marshall is going to a conference championship game. I can't tell you how many games we're going to win. I don't know. We got Ohio State on the schedule. We got Virginia Tech on the schedule. We play in a very tough Sun Belt East division. Wins are not easy to come by, but I don't care about any of that. The expectation for me, success for me, is that Marshall wins a Sun Belt championship and they win a bowl game. Up until recently, Marshall had the best number one bowl win percentage of anybody ever, right? And we lost the game last year and lost the one before that, and now we're not. And that's something that I liked to be able to say, and I want to be able to say that again. It's all about winning, right? Championships of some sort.
I'm right there. Same. Got to win the Sun Belt. And got to win that bowl game. That's success for me.
Is there anything else that you guys would like to share or think that we should know about this 2024 Marshall Thundering Herd football team?
We're going to tailgate. I know that. We're going to tailgate. Come hell or high water, win or loss, it doesn't matter. We're going to tailgate. No, but as far as the team goes, they're always exciting to watch. Right. And I'm not trying to like dumb down your question, but I'm going to tell you this. You guys have got to get to Huntington, West Virginia. You've got to come and see a game. You've got to make sure you make a weekend out of it and you're not rushed in and rushed out in the same day, because the tailgating thing was not a joke. Right. Russ and I have a great time, and we have an open tailgate for fans, opposing fans, whatever, to come by, hang out, talk the herd. We just have a good time. So win or lose, we want to win every damn game, right? But the way it goes in Huntington, West Virginia is you will be met with unmatched hospitality. It doesn't matter if you're an opposing fan or not. You will be met with a warm plate, a cold drink, and we'll talk about some football. And then if you happen to be a fan of the opposing team for those 3 hours that we're in the stadium, we will be bitter mortal enemies, right? But win or lose, no matter how it goes, as we're walking out of the stadium together, we're going to invite you right back over for more food and more to drink. That's just how we roll in Huntington, West Virginia. So that's what you need to know about the Thundering Herd. The game is not just what's on the field. That's the most important part, is what's on the field. But man, we're unmatched when it comes to hospitality. And I'll beat that drum until I take my last breath. No, I have never run into somebody that said, I went to Huntington, I had a horrible experience, I'll never go back. Never have I had that happen, ever. So, guys, we want the G5 Hive at some point in Huntington, West Virginia, and we'd like to have it this season. We will undoubtedly be doing a ThunderCast live at a home game. So, we'll do a little cross promotion stuff, and you can do some, G5 Hive live from the Joan. What? The G5 Hive live? I mean, what the hell did I just invent here, right? So get your butts to the Joan one time, Russ.
For the spring game, we had a smoker with a couple of 100 pounds of meat on it. So that's for the spring game. So we do tailgate.
We do.
Well, Rus and KD, this has been great, awesome conversation. We thank both of you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. Greatly appreciate it.
Man, thank you so much for having us. I'm really sorry we went an hour and something long, hour and a half.
When the conversation's good, man, that's just what happens.
That's just how we roll. Russ and I are a little long-winded, and when we get us talking about the herd, we just can't really shut up. So sorry about that.
I keep telling KD we could cut this show in half if he didn't talk. But no, we appreciate it. We also appreciate what you guys do for non-P4. I hate these terms, P4 and G5, but it works great for the name of your show. I just hate the elitist attitude that the non-G5 has with the G5. That's the reason I hate that term, is because they make it sound like it's not good football, and I think it's amazing football.
Yeah. If they think it's lesser than, then feel free to schedule an SBC team on your schedule, and we'll see how that works out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just saying.
But thank you guys for having us.
All right. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.